2022 was the year that I had the greatest highs, but also the hardest of times. I had a huge year in 2022. I bought this house that I'm currently in. I was running Lisa Study Guides. I was also trying to sell Lisa Study Guides. I was also trying to grow my second business, Tutor Boss, and I was also setting up and managing my mum's retirement as well. And with each of these, even though some of them were huge achievements, like eventually selling my business, the stress of actually selling the business, the management of two businesses at the one time, and experiencing friendship breakups in my own personal life just was quite a lot. And now that I've actually had the time to reflect, I'd really love to share with you 6 lessons I've learned so far in 2023. Because on the other side of great discomfort comes great reward. And that's truly what I've experienced, because these lessons, I definitely wouldn't have been able to have learned them if I hadn't gone through what I went through last year. The first lesson I learned is don't be proud of how much you think you can handle. Do you know what's really messed up in our modern society these days? It's that we are constantly being fed the dialogue of being more and more productive, that we need to always be doing something with our time. And so what that leads to is us just stacking on more and more and more for ourselves, up to a point where it's no longer healthy for us. And this is the mentality I've had pretty much my entire life. It's actually so messed up when you think about it, because as humans, we're not supposed to be working at 100% and more capacity all of the time. And when I reflect back and I see how much I was handling at the one time, but how proud I was that I was capable of doing so, it just makes me feel a little bit revolted, to be honest. I'd be feeding myself these lies saying, you know, the fact that you can manage 2 businesses at one time, the fact that they're both growing, and you're in the middle of selling a business, and you're managing your mum's requirement, and you're actually buying your own home with your partner. I saw each one of these as achievements, and I was proud that I could handle it, whereas most people probably couldn't. But what was the real result of this? Immense burnout. So in reality, I couldn't actually handle it. I thought I could until my body literally physically reacted and said, no, you can't do this anymore. I've never experienced burnout as bad as it was last year, when I was literally on the couch and I couldn't do anything, even though I wanted to. There was just brain fog. I couldn't bear the thought of putting energy into my work, and this lasted for quite some time. And as somebody who has always been proud of constantly doing things, of go, 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 which actually in reality is restlessness, which is not that healthy, this was an experience that was completely foreign to me. And so what it's taught me now is, rather than attaching my self-worth, rather than attaching my success with how much I think I can handle, what is a lot healthier of an approach is actually starting to listen to my body, understanding how far I can actually push myself, because that is infinitely better for long-term sustainability. And this ties into my next lesson learned, and that is to listen to your body. I was so much in my mind managing all of that stress that I had actually become completely dissociated with my body and its needs. I had actually started getting eczema. I'm somebody who's had eczema my entire life, but I've been pretty good at controlling the eczema to the point where most people don't even notice it. But last year, I started to get eczema flare-ups all over my body. It had never been like that before. So that was actually another thing that was compounding on top of the stress I was already experiencing. But because I was so disconnected from my body, because I was so much in my mind, I didn't recognize straight away that it was actually because of the stress, because of how much I was adding onto my plate that was causing this eczema. So I was looking at absolutely everything else that could be causing it. I was looking at the pollen in the air. I was getting air purifiers for the home. I was minimizing my skincare, even though I hadn't actually changed my skincare in years. So in theory, that didn't make much sense. So I was trying all these other things, and to be honest, in the end, it wasn't even me that recognized that it was my body telling me to slow down. It was actually Josh who had made the connection and went, hey, what if this is actually related to your stress? And so what this has taught me is to actually start valuing my body more, start listening to my body rather than just valuing my mind. If you're a T in the Myers-Briggs, or a thinker rather than a feeler, then I think you can relate to this, because usually as thinkers, we operate mostly from up here rather than down here. And I used to be really proud of that. Whereas now I realize from this experience that they're both important. And it's only when some of these things started to get removed from my plate that my eczema completely cleared up. My next lesson is to live a life aligned with your values, otherwise you're going to get stressed out. Stress in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. When you look at the stress performance curve, it goes like this. You've got the start of the curve where you've got too little stress. That's not good because you want to have a little bit of stress just to get you motivated and going. And so when you start to build up a little bit more stress, this is where we say it's the optimum level. It's enough to actually get you going. Think about the last minute deadline and that stress that creates, that gets you moving and going on something that you've procrastinated. So stress can be good, but when it gets to the other side of the curve, that's when stress is too much and it starts to go into the negatives. When you have too much stress, you can start to feel exhausted, and if you just keep pushing yourself, it eventually leads you to burnout. Having awareness of where you are on that curve can really help you understand whether doing something is aligned with the life you want to lead for yourself. So for example, with Tutor Boss, my business coaching business, I have recently just reached 6 figures, which I'm super happy about. But I got to a stage where essentially I was starting to max out on my time. So one of the elements of my business that takes up a lot of time is doing my consulting calls. So these are free 30-minute calls where someone can jump onto a call with me and discover more about coaching to see whether or not we're the right fit for one another. Now, I will have anywhere from 3 to 8 calls a week. Let's say if we take the 8 calls times 30 minutes is 4 hours. So that's 4 hours of my work week that's dedicated to these discovery calls. Now, 4 hours in isolation doesn't sound like a lot, but when you actually look at my calendar and look at the other things I'm doing, it actually really starts to fill out my time. So I only work Tuesdays to Thursdays, which means 4 hours actually takes up a greater ratio of my time rather than someone who's working Monday to Friday. Now, on top of that, I've already got my existing coaching clients and calls, which I need to prioritize and spend time with, which cuts my time down even more. And then on top of that, because these calls are booked through a calendar, people can allocate themselves slots wherever they want throughout my day. So this actually means that although it's only 4 hours of my day, actually takes up more time because I have to context switch every time I have a call. So I might be working on writing a YouTube script, let's say, but if I have a call in 5 minutes, then I constantly have to be thinking about that coming up and I need to actually prepare for it. And so I spend that half an hour with that person, but to come back to the original project I was working on, it takes 20 minutes when you do context switching to actually get fully into the flow state. Even though it's only 4 hours, the bandwidth that it takes in my head actually takes up even more time. Because I'm at this stage of my business where I am making 6 figures from it, my next logical step is to actually just hire somebody to do these calls for me. This way I'm delegating that time. It frees up my time to start working on other parts of the business. Now, this thought process is actually aligned with my values because I want to have flexibility in my time. I don't want to be tied to somebody booking in a call and me needing to show up. However, this is actually when I started to feel the stress, and I really didn't even understand why until I actually went to my psychologist to talk about it. And the stress I felt was actually this. When you hire somebody to start working for you, yes, eventually when you delegate, it means that you have less work off your plate. But initially, there's going to be that increase of workload just to interview people, to onboard them, and to manage them, to make sure that they're actually comfortable in their role. And this is a minimum of 3 months where you do have that increase in workload. And I realized that this was making me stressed because as I was thinking about it, I was entering that state of burnout again. I could just feel it. I could feel that I didn't have the capacity for this. I was basically just recovering from burnout anyway, so I didn't want to enter back into adding on a lot of plates onto my plate load. And it just left me feeling this tension of should I hire or should I not? Because I had different values in both categories. I had the value over here where if I hire, I get more of that flexibility and freedom eventually. But my values here are just to slow down. I don't want to get burnt out anymore. I don't want to be feeling stressed. And I know that if I did hire somebody, then I would be feeling more of that. So interestingly, when we look at aligning our life according to our values, sometimes we can also have values that are at opposition with one another. And so what I've learned here is to recognize that it's okay to have these values that are in opposition with one another, but to basically prioritize prioritize? Which value do I think is more important for myself right now? And for me right now, it's really just to slow down. It's to start looking after my body more. It's to start listening to my body more, and honestly just enjoy where I currently am in life, having just sold my first business, having my second business hit 6 figures, and entering maintenance mode with this business. This leads me to my next lesson that I've learned so far in 2023, and that's to measure your happiness based on your inner peace. The feeling of happiness is incredibly transient and ephemeral. It comes and then it goes, which is why so many of us are constantly on that rat race of seeking happiness. What I've realized is rather than using the metric of happiness, using the metric of inner peace is something that is a lot more consistent and has longevity in it. So if I go back to my prior example of whether or not I should hire somebody to do my discovery calls for me, to hire somebody would have made me happy in that moment, but I don't think it would have brought me inner peace, because if anything, it would have made me more stressed because I'd have to go through the hiring process, the onboarding process, and then actually managing that person. So what I realized is that sometimes when something brings you happiness in that moment, it doesn't necessarily equate to actually bringing you inner peace. When I had that amazing conversation with my psychologist about the tension that I was feeling of wanting to grow the business and hire somebody, but then also wanting to slow down, and it was only after I made the decision not to hire that I felt this wave of relief come over me, and I realized that what I felt in that moment was actually inner peace for myself. I felt good and I felt relaxed. I felt calm about the fact that I chose not to hire, which told me everything I needed to know that I had made the best decision for myself. So the question I want you to ask yourself is, when was the last time I checked in with my inner peace? How am I feeling at the moment? Am I feeling peaceful, or are there aspects of my life where I'm not feeling peaceful, and what can I do about them? Now, the next lesson I've learned in 2023 is we all have cycles of high activity versus low activity. As I was mentioning at the start of this video, there is immense dialogue on how to be more and more productive, and I can see that the landscape is starting to change because people are starting to be anti-productivity. But what I really love is the phrase slow productivity, which I've learned from Cal Newport. My understanding as humans is that we go through waves of productivity. We have moments of high productivity. For example, if you're gearing up to finish a project and the deadline is coming, you're going to amp up the amount that you're working, and you're going to have periods of low activity. So once you're done with the project and you've submitted the deadline, you've put it forward to your client, there's nothing left for you to do, and so that's going to be a moment of slow productivity. And this is actually natural for us as humans, and actually way healthier than constantly being productive. Cal Newport uses this example of when we were back as cavemen, let's say, we would for most of the day actually just be chilling. We would be sitting by the fire, or maybe dancing and enjoying life, sleeping, and then moments when we were hunting, or the males were hunting, then you'd have that amp up in activity where it was high adrenaline, high stress. But that's okay to have that high adrenaline and high stress in those moments, because it does taper off. Whereas in the modern world now, a lot of us just keep pushing that line and pushing us to burnout. And because now I'm aware of these cycles of high activity versus low activity, that actually really helped me make my decision of not hiring somebody for the business. Because now that I've reached 6 figures in my business, I know that the next stage is to hire a person so that I can grow to multi-6 figures. In the past, I would have felt that pressure of, okay, let's go. You've gone from 4 figures to 5 figures to 6 figures. Now let's go on to multi-6 figures. But understanding this curve almost gives me permission to slow down and recognize, hey, you know what? It's okay for me to actually sit in a period of low activity, for me to just maintain my coaching business as it is, especially when I had such a big year last year of running 2 businesses, selling one, buying my home. I have the awareness now of not feeling guilty because I want to slow down, not feeling bad about myself because I, in this period, just want to be in this low activity state. And the reason why I don't feel guilty is because I know that eventually things will ramp up again. Once I've given myself this time to sit back and relax for a bit, I know I'm gonna have that surge of energy, that inspiration, and then that excitement to go, you know what, I'm ready now. I'm ready to hire. I'm ready to grow my business. The next lesson I've learned in 2023 is that your goals are not necessarily your values. I used to conflate these two ideas all the time. I thought that my goals were my values. So for example, you might have the goal of wanting to make $100,000 this year. And let's say you work really hard to make that happen, and suddenly one day you are making $100,000 this year. But the question is, under what circumstances are you earning that $100,000? Are you earning that $100,000 because you're working overtime? You're burnt out because the work is unfulfilling. You hate your peers. You hate your teammates. And so while you're happy in that moment that you've made $100,000, you realize that it's not actually aligned with the life that you actually want to lead. So when you're formulating your goals, I don't want you just to look at it in terms of what do I want to achieve. I want you to apply a values lens to that goal as well, to ensure that when you actually hit that goal, you're actually happy overall with your accomplishment. When I take myself as an example, two of my values are freedom and flexibility. So I can have the goal of wanting to make $100,000 in my coaching business, but I want to make sure that as I'm working my way towards that goal, I'm actually aligning my business structure, aligning the decisions to freedom and flexibility. So how has this actually come to fruition? For me, freedom meant only working 3 days a week on their business so that I could spend the other 2 days just exploring other things in life I'm interested in, whether that be my fitness, whether that be creative pursuits, hobbies, etc. And so by applying this values-based lens, it means I've assigned myself 3 days a week where I'm working on my business Tutor Boss. So what this has meant is that for me to actually reach that 100K goal, I've had to be smart about how I use these 3 days, as opposed to just creating a goal where I want to hit 100K and then just burning myself into the ground, working overtime, working extended hours to try to rush and get towards that goal. And the beautiful thing about applying the values-based lens to your goals is that you actually start enjoying the journey itself of getting there, rather than just having the goal as a destination where you're constantly feeling that rush to get to it. So in my example where I value freedom and therefore I only work 3 days a week, it actually has meant that I've actually been able to start enjoying that freedom from the get-go. It was actually integrated into that journey. So rather than hitting 100K and then looking back at my life and going, wow, I work on the weekends for this, I work at nighttime for this, I sacrifice time with my friends and family, I can actually look back and go, hey, I get to spend my Mondays going to the gym, going to yoga, exploring my hobbies. I get to spend my Fridays actually going out with friends, doing my courses where I get to learn more on my storytelling skills. And so actually having hit this goal of 100K, I can reflect back and actually feel a lot more success because I've actually been successful my entire time leading up to this goal. I really love this quote from Viktor E. Frankl in his book Man's Search for Meaning. Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued, it must ensue. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, I think you might also really like another video I've created where I talk about how you can manage burnout as a business owner. I think if you're somebody who works for yourself, or you want to work for yourself, or you just want to have a better life where you're not feeling burnt out all the time, this is the video for you, because I don't think any of us start businesses because we want to feel trapped and we want to push ourselves to the point of burnout. So if you want some tips on how to actually manage your burnout, then go ahead and watch that video. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.